My name is Zuzanna Sadowska and I'm a social anthropologist. I spent almost 1 full year conducting ethnographic fieldwork in Brazil, and today I will talk about the brew that is most commonly known in the Western science as ayahuasca. In the Brazilian state of Acre, where I conducted my research, the brew is known under many names and is consumed within diverse religious and indigenous practices. Uni, Nishipai, Vegetal, Daimi, which are the examples of the different names of the brew consumed within the different local rituals, are usually prepared from the combinations of two plants, Banisteriopsis capi and Psychotra viridis, the second of which contains DMT. For the local people, however, the chemical composition doesn't define what the brew is. But instead it's força, what means power or force in Brazilian Portuguese. Each brew is considered to work through its unique força, and hence it is also treated and experienced as ontologically different being. Uni, Nishipai, Vegetal, Daimi are experienced as different things because they are aimed to connect people with different powers. Moreover, each Uni, each Vegetal, each Nishipa is also different because it is co-created by multiple relations, the sum of which gives each brew its unique force. From the perspective of Western science, those many different brews are treated as one singular thing because of shared active substance, DMT. From this perspective, just the effects of the brew are considered to be individually very differentiated and context-dependent, while the brew itself is treated as something that possesses a certain essence, independent of the context. This essence is attributed to its material propensities and ways in which they act on the human nervous system. During my research, I was surprised to learn that it's not only the brew's effect that is treated in the context which I observe as variable and unstable, but as many people told me, the brew itself is never the same. Today, I will discuss how the brew, the many forms of which works chemically through the same active substances, can exist in different social contexts as many different things. I refer to these phenomenon as the brew ontological multiplicity. In other words, the brew itself, not only its effects, can become many different things in many different contexts to many different groups and people. The goal of my presentation is to approach this multiplicity by asking, from an anthropological perspective, how are different social and non-human relations co-creating different forms of the brew existence. To answer these questions, we must first discuss the anthropological concept of relations. Understanding this concept will help us to comprehend the local concept of força, as well as its broader anthropological understanding as social power, which I will discuss in the second part of the presentation. Now we can take a closer look at anthropological concept of relations. Relations are considered the mastered concept of anthropology. On the one hand, they are used by anthropologists as methodological tools, meaning descriptions of the relationship between things help us to capture and organize observed phenomena. Relations, however, are for some scholars not only methodological instruments, but also a metaphysical concept. In this sense, they are considered basic ontological units of reality. In other words, relations can refer not only to the external connections between objects, but also to internal entanglements that produce objects. In the approach called relational ontology, things that are indeed relations themselves are the basic component unit of the reality. Relational ontology stands in contrast to the metaphysic of individualism. The individualistic atomistic view of reality is a belief that the world is populated with independent entities and objects that have determinate inherent properties that pre-exist their interactions. Contrary to this, relational ontology assumes that things, entities, or analyzed in this context substances don't have essences or non-relational forms of existence. Instead, they emerge only through their relation with the world. Only in this manner can they acquire and manifest certain characteristics. Thus, the characteristic which object possesses are the effect of the stabilization of an object. Stabilization that results from the entanglements of specific relations rather than set objects having some defined inherent properties. Drawing on the works of Karen Barad, light may behave either as particle or a wave depending on the apparatus we use to observe or measure it. Does the apparatus itself play an active role in creating what is very often considered to be a stable or objective property of an observed phenomena? In the context of this presentation, the apparatus used to measure light can be substituted with social practices. Different forms of existence thus emerge for the brew only through the specific social practices and the human and non-human relations that are involved in those practices. In this sense, the concept of relations goes deeper than the well-known concept of the set and setting. The idea of the set and setting assumes that while the effect of the psychedelic substance is individually differentiated and context-dependent, the substance itself is singular, meaning that it possesses a certain predetermined essence independent of this context. This singularity stems from thinking about the substance through the lens of its material propensities, such as their chemical makeup and influence on the human nervous system. The relational approach to substances assumes instead that the substance itself is unstable and undeterminate. It becomes partially stabilized only by the apparatus understood here as a social practice which plays an active role in producing what the substance becomes. As we will see, this theory of becoming is consistent with local thinking about the brew through the lenses of Força. Going back to Accra now, I was surprised to learn that in the places where I conducted my research, there is no such a thing as one singular ayahuasca. Brews composed of Banisteriopsis capi and Psychotria viridis within their diverse array of social practices are instead treated and experienced as different beings endowed with different powers. From the local perspective, the brew is considered to work through its força, the animated force which is experienced by a person after its consumption. This force is felt through the physical sensation and perceptual change that enable a person to share circulating energies that usually a human is not perceptive to. Those energies are connected with many beings that exist in the universe, for example, other human, plants, spirits, animals, or the so-called astral entities. Thus, the force of the brew opens a human being to interaction with the non-material dimensions of reality that are filled by many powers that can be either beneficial or detrimental to humans. The goal of the social practices surrounding the brew's consumption is to control what sorts of power will act through the brew, as well as to direct those powers toward healing. The power of the brew emerges at many stages of the interaction with the brew: the plant's collections, the brew preparations, and the ritual of its consumption. During all of them, specific social practices and rules have to be maintained in order to protect the brew from unwanted energies which can influence a person consuming that brew later. First of all, each plant used for the brew's preparation is considered to have different power depending on the place where it has grown and the manner in which it is collected. Second, during the ritual of the preparation, called feitio, diverse energies penetrate the brew, giving it its unique força. Those energies are related to the power of the previously collected plants, the people participating in the ritual, the place where it occurs, as well as different sorts of spirits called during the ceremony. Finally, the força of the brew, which a person feels during the very moment of its consumption, also depends on the individual circumstances of that person, their level of purification, which is related to the moral conduct and spiritual evolution. When the consumption of a brew happens within the ritual, special chants are sung to affect the circulating energies. Those chants serves as a tool to control what sorts of power and astral beings will act during the ceremony, and as the key to open specific spiritual realms. As we can see, at all stages of interaction with the brew, Força is co-created through the relation with the multiple human and non-human actants, those participating in the ritual, the place where it is conducted, the brew itself, and all of the spirits and energies that may appear during the ceremony. The sum of these relations is what gives each brew its specific Força. In the previous part of my presentation, I focused on the local understanding of força as it relates to the force of the brew itself. Now, I will discuss how we can approach the concept of força from the broader anthropological perspective and expand our understanding of this concept, relating it to the social relations of power. From this perspective, the relations through which the brew emerges could be seen as the product of specific social structures, discourses, and power hierarchies. In the previous model, instead, they rather refer to the diverse metaphysical forces acting in the universe. To understand this social dimension of the meaning of power, we have to take a close look at the specifics of one of the places where I conducted my research, the Addiction Treatment Center Via da Paz. Via da Paz is located in the remote Brazilian state of Acre. A large area of the state is covered by the Amazon rainforests when plants Banisteriopsis capi and Psychotria viridis naturally grow. Brews prepared from the combination of these plants have been used by indigenous groups inhabiting this area in shamanic healing rituals for generations. In the 20th century, 3 religions were founded in this region, which considered the brew's consumption as their central sacrament: Santo Daime, União do Vegetal, and Barquinha. Nowadays, in Acre, the practices related to the consumption of sacred plants exist alongside the brutal structures of the illicit drug trade and substance abuse. Acre is a major road for drug trafficking due to its proximity to 2 of the world's 3 main cocaine producers, Peru and Bolivia. Here, the largest Brazilian criminal organizations struggle for power, and drug trafficking and poverty contribute to the problems of homelessness, robberies, assaults, and murderers, positioning Acre among the states with the highest crime rates in Brazil. Via da Paz was established 22 years ago in Rio Branco, the capital city of Acre, with the aim of providing healing for people addicted to psychoactive drugs, mostly cocaine, crack, and alcohol. It functions as a therapeutic and religious community where people dwell and work together for the center. The majority of people in Via da Paz are from the marginalized social groups, and many of them experience homelessness and have been involved with Brazilian drug trafficking organizations. Within the treatment center, there are 2 separate communities: one dedicated to persons undergoing 9-month addiction therapy, the other to people who decided to remain permanently at the center after finishing their treatment. Here, addiction treatment is based on community support as well as individual and group therapy with the center's psychologists. A person who enters therapy must also agree to a regular consumption of the brew, which here is known as vegetal. According to the people who stay at the center, the consumption of vegetal is considered to be the most important practice, enabling a personal transformation on the path to sobriety. People undergoing therapy at the center consume vegetal during the religious União do Vegetal session, as well as often during everyday activities, including work. Around 2,000 liters of vegetal is prepared monthly in the center just for the internal use. In the center, it is assumed that through the specific social practices, the brew can be stabilized as a medicine for addiction. Thus, the aim of the center's social practices is to reduce multiple potentialities of what a brew may become in order to make it a stable healing instrument. However, as I noticed during my fieldwork, the brew quite often didn't work in the way it was supposed to. There were many explanations as to why this happens, which were grounded in the spiritual discourse. However, as we will see, this discourse strongly replicated the relations of power structures and social inequalities. Relatively few people undergoing addiction treatment spoke of experiences that we may call mystical or transcendental, such as receiving visions, encounters with spirits, or astral travel, which are so often associated with the brew's healing effect. Although they sensed the force of the brew, they mostly said that this force has the effect of making them feel inner peace or discipline. When asked why they didn't have a certain types of experiences, many answered that their physical matter is too heavy or too dirty, possibly contaminated by the drugs they used to consume or by the unethical acts which they committed. The possibility of interaction with the spiritual realms is, in this community, connected with the ability to enter into the subtle body, meaning the energetic body of a person which is perceptible to diverse non-material powers acting in the world and is able to move between different planes of the universe. According to local discourse, in order to be capable of entering into the subtle body, a person has to be pure enough, and the degree of person purification depends on their action in current and past lives. Although it is assumed there that vegetal purifies a person, it is also assumed that the brew acts on everyone differently, depending on the person's individual spiritual evolution. Thus, not everyone has the same capabilities of interacting with spiritual realms under the Força. Experiences that we call mystical are treated in Via da Paz as a kind of gift from the vegetal that someone must deserve in order to experience. The act of being disciplined by the brew is instead conceptualized as spiritual punishment. The spiritual punishment is associated with the unethical acts committed by a person and attributed to the unpleasant feelings appearing after vegetal consumption. While many people staying at the center were considered incapable of having certain experiences due to moral fault, the person in power had them, although they also engaged in unethical acts. The narratives about spiritual punishment and dirty matter were part of the official discourse at the center, and they were selective in terms of to whom they referred to. These narratives might be interpreted as the way to reproduce the power relations through the spiritual discourse at the center by inscribing the social inequalities into the very body of a person. Diverse interpretation of why the brew sometimes doesn't work as it's supposed to could be also be seen as a social way of dealing with the impossibility of fully stabilizing the brew. These interpretations serve to explain those agencies of a brew that do not fit with the general ontological assumption about it. I also want to add that many people staying in the center were scared to leave the community because of the diverse reasons. Some of them due to the fear that living outside the center will make them more prone to relapse, which does happen quite often. Others because of their socioeconomic situation. Also, for many, entering the treatment was a path to escape from violent drug trafficking organizations to which they used to belong or to avoid jail time. This fear of leaving the community may lead us to the question, what sorts of dependencies can the brew heal and what sorts of dependencies can arise around its consumption? However, there are no easy answers here. Going back to the previous social structure, for many who stayed at the center was very challenging. They usually had limited resources to build a new life outside via the pies. Moreover, in Accra, one accepted way to quit a local drug trafficking organization is to become a follower of one of the religions which exists in the region. In this case, the criminal organization respects the spiritual transformation, allowing those who choose this path to exit the cartel. What I found very important during my research is that while talking to residents about their treatment, those with whom I spoke with frequently attributed their positive change to the social change brought by the community itself, rather than to some breakthrough experience related to brews consumption. In other words, overcoming addiction was there frequently attributed to the social context which the center provides. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the brew does not have healing potential, nor that we shouldn't treat spirituality seriously. However, the brew at the center definitely didn't work as a magic bullet, and within the discourse surrounding the psychedelic medicalization is very often approached in this manner. I have the impression that the psychedelic Renaissance discourse, through its attempts to produce certain ontologies of ayahuasca to stabilize it as medicine, quite often oversimplifies ayahuasca effects and detaches it from the broader social relations, like, for example, relations of power and inequality. To sum up, the brew is not a singular stable substance interacting with changing set and setting. The brew is ontologically multiple. It comes into being only through and within a diverse entanglements of human and non-human relations. For people in the places where I conducted my research, those relations are mostly understood as diverse metaphysical powers influencing its força. From an anthropological perspective, those relations can be also understood more broadly and can encompass social structures and power relations. Relational thinking about substances can help us approach them more broadly, understand the multiple possibilities of what a substance can become, and overcome the magic bullet discourse. Psychedelics, including the brew called ayahuasca, are still treated within the medicalization discourse in a very individualistic terms. This is manifested inter alia through the way in which the concept of setting is usually approached. This concept is still apart from the substance itself. Moreover, it is usually limited only to its understanding as a therapeutic setting. I suggest that much broader social structures shapes the way out of addiction, structures within which the dependence on drugs of abuse emerged, those related to the healing process, as well as future social relations that will shape person's life after the therapy. For many people, especially those from marginalized social groups, individual breakthrough therapeutic experiences will not necessarily change much. Because addiction is not only an individual condition. Addiction is strongly related to the broader social relations that are often left apart the medicalization approaches. Thank you.